Hey everybody, how's it going? So today I wanted to go over something that keeps showing up in my comment section. A lot of people want me to discuss, which is this little piece of news. I should put news in quotes there, that the IRS is going to be going through all your transactions, and they'll be able to see all your transactions as long as you have more than $600 in the bank. This is semi-misleading, but I get why people are up in arms about it. The reality is not that they can see all your transactions. This is a proposal that, if instituted, would give the IRS access to only two new numbers. Just two. A, gross inflow, and B, gross outflow for the year on accounts where there is a balance of more than 600 or inflow and outflow of more than 600. So it's not access to all transactions, it is simply those two new numbers. A, gross inflow, and B, gross outflow. Now, I can completely understand why even that new information is information that you would not want them to have access to, and I understand why people are up in arms over them being able to have access to this new data. Again, if you're listening to somebody who's telling you that they have access to your full transaction history and all this other type of stuff, I would suggest that you read the primary documents, read the primary sources for yourself. If there's anything I learned starting around 4 or 5 years ago, it's that it's really important to actually read the primary sources. Do not trust a pundit, do not trust a podcast, do not trust a radio show host to tell you the truth. They're going to tell you the truth that is more spicy, not the reality. But reality is often more boring than the way people spice it up to be on television and the internet. But that being said, let's just take it at this value. What are they trying to do with this? Well, they're going to be trying to find people who are hiding money that they're not supposed to be hiding, or not reporting all the money they're supposed to on their taxes. Now, I believe this may have an alternative reason for existing other than the actual reason that's being proposed. Information overload is going to make it virtually impossible, in my opinion, for this to actually work. If you were to just take a look at what's been going on since we started collecting all this different metadata on calls and contacts and emails for the purposes of counterterrorism, are we really preventing a lot of terror attacks with this, or are we simply collecting insane amounts of data that, even though the data is there, there's no way to reasonably parse through it so that it's actually useful to you? You can have all the data that you want, but if you're not able to parse through it in a manner that allows you to figure out what's going on, or that allows you to figure out, when you're dealing with 320 million people, which ones are the likely ones that are committing some sort of fraud, you're just going to be bombarded with data that requires people manually go through it, and you're going to get overwhelmed to the point where it doesn't actually help at all. And I strongly believe this is one of those cases where someone in management will ask for more data or think it's cool to have more data who doesn't actually know what to do with it in reality. I'll give you an example that may be more down to earth to you. If you've ever met someone in small business who thinks that they can replace management with a camera system, like, instead of showing up to work, instead of motivating my staff, instead of training a manager that knows what he's doing, or inculcating a company culture and management that actually is able to look after what's going on, I'm going to put up cameras and then I'll be able to see if people are screwing around, so they're not going to screw around anymore. That's not actually how this works, because if you are only going to spend 20 or 30 minutes looking at cameras, and you think that you're going to be able to look through what everybody's doing on 16 cameras over the course of a 40-hour work week and follow them from monitor 1, monitor 2, monitor 3, oh, he's back on monitor 8. Oh, did he go to monitor 3 or 2? Oh, okay, now he's back on monitor 1. If you think you're actually going to go through all that stuff, then, in my opinion, you're delusional. You're not actually going to monitor your staff based on all of this, and especially if you think, oh, I'm going to have the ones that record audio, so I'll know if they're screwing around because I'll hear what they're saying. Well, great. Now you have to listen to it closer to real time, or 2x, because over 2x you can't really make out the conversations very well. You're not going to sit there listening to 40 hours of camera footage, because then you might as well just be there. It's one of those things where people think that more data is actually going to help them, when in reality more data simply means you have more information that you need a method to parse. And people always think about the data. Management and higher-ups, they think about the data, but they never think about how they're actually going to parse that data so it's useful to them. And I don't see how you parse this data in a manner that's going to actually make it useful to them. What I think is the idea is here is, if we put this out there, maybe more people will be voluntarily forthcoming on their tax returns that were not voluntarily forthcoming prior, because they will believe that we are spying on them. If they believe that they're being watched in a way they weren't being watched before, then maybe we will have less people cheating on taxes. I think that's what this is actually about. It's not about how the data is actually going to help, because there are many cases of having information overload in this type of fashion backfiring. The second concern I've seen people talk about is a bit more of a populist point. I don't believe this to be true because it's fundamentally financially not viable or effective, which is if you set the threshold so low to, around $600 or more of gross inflows or outflows or balance, well, then you're going to be catching a lot of poor people in there and it's going to be poor people that are not able to actually defend themselves against this particular move. So for instance, myself, I pay over $900 a month for someone to look after what's going on with regards to taxes, compliance with filings I have to do, all of this type of stuff. Now you may think that's insane. I pay my accountant way less than that. You're getting ripped off. I have 2 for-profit businesses. One of them has over 10 employees. I have a nonprofit, 501c3. There's a lot of paperwork that goes into that, a lot of compliance stuff goes into that, and a 501c4 that is dealing with political lobbying. I've hired lobbyists in about 6 states now. We're going to be going for 7 soon. That has collected money from people inside and outside of the United States being used for numerous different purposes. This is very, very complicated. I lead a complicated business life at this point, and paying $900 a month for someone to go over everything I'm doing, to look over everything that's going on in my accounting software, to look over everything and go, okay, what you're doing here makes sense. What you're doing here doesn't make sense. Why are you doing that? You should probably be doing it like this instead. Louis, are you getting audited? Is New York State asking you for 27 different forms of documentation on just one particular business over the past 4 years? Don't worry, I'll take care of it. That's worth it to me. And I am not worried about that audit in any way, shape, or form because my CPA tells me precisely what I should be doing. He tells me why I should be doing it in that way. He makes suggestions so that I'm in compliance with local laws and regulations and so that I am reporting in a way that makes it easy if I get audited to show why certain things are taxed the way they are, why certain things are not taxed the way they are, and so on and so forth. And this entire process makes it so that when I get audited, I am not the one personally dealing with it. If I was poor, I would not have this type of help. I would not be able to afford his help. I would not be able to afford even cheaper help. So when someone comes by from a collections agency for the state or for the IRS and demands 27 different forms of documentation, I would likely shit myself. I would not be able to defend myself. I would not be able to explain everything, and I would get screwed. And I've heard people say that, okay, they're doing this. They're going after the little guy because the little guy won't be able to defend themselves. And it is a really good piece of populist outrage over there. But the reason I don't think this is the case is quite simple. I don't think it makes sense for the IRS to spend $10 or $20 or $30,000 auditing somebody that has $800 in inflow or outflow for the year, or $8,000 in inflow and outflow for the year. There's not really much blood that you could get from a stone. And my CPA has told me that in recent years, there have been more attempts at getting blood from a stone. He's been surprised when, he has clients that are worth in the hundreds of millions that get minor looks into them. And he has people that make $50,000 a year and they just dig and dig and dig and dig. And at some point you kind of wonder, maybe half of this agent's year's salary is being spent on one audit. It's kind of weird. But you get the point here. The idea that there is going to be a mass auditing of people who are completely broke, it would just be financially, even I understand why people would be mad at that, and I understand why they would think that's the reasoning behind what's going on, but that would just fundamentally, from an economic standpoint, from a greed standpoint, that wouldn't make sense or be economically viable in the least. So I don't think that is what is going on. But it definitely is something concerning to see that there's, again, just more government agencies being able to have more power and get access to more information. I understand why people are pushing back and saying, no, we don't like this. They're in our lives enough as it is. You have, 70,000 pages of tax law? I mean, there's probably no man, woman, or child or corporation in the United States that's not disobeying at least a small portion of that. If not, I'm not even talking about on purpose, just because they didn't know that the law is the way it is, because there are so many laws, it's almost impossible to comply with all of them. There's really very few people, I imagine, that are particularly excited about this. And those who say that this is a good thing because you may catch more rich people that are disobeying taxes, and we should give the IRS more power because they're going to go after the rich. One thing that I think is important to I understand, even though I understand where you're coming from, I understand, there are a lot of rich tax cheats out there, is that most of these measures that wind up going after the rich eventually wind up going after the poor. If you read throughout history, you'll see that the income tax was initially intended for very high income earners, very wealthy people. It was never really intended for people that work at Model Sporting Goods putting price tags on basketballs. And as time moves forward, it starts to slowly make its way down to everybody else. These measures that we put on the richest in society very often wind up affecting the poorest in society, because from the moment that I got my first job, I was being pegged with the high federal income tax that in the beginning was really mostly focusing and targeting high wealth individuals and high earners. And the idea that if you hand all of this arsenal to the IRS, that they are primarily going to be going after the rich, I think is not rooted in reality. When you think about the tax cheats, just to think about this for a moment. I know this is going to sound weird, but where do you think there's more tax cheating? Like when you go to a Best Buy, if you say, hey, if I pay cash, there's no tax, right? Or when you go to one of those electronic stores in Midtown Manhattan that has the flickering lights in the window, which one do you think is more likely to say, yeah, okay, cool, fine, no tax if you pay cash? Where do you think you're more likely to see people getting paid off the books? Walmart or a small town grocery store? There are lots of businesses in America that are evading tax, not even because they want to go home making $130,000 a year, but simply because they're barely hanging on as is, and that difference of 20 to 30% that they're going to pay if they're paying taxes versus doing things under the table or off the books is the difference between them existing and not existing. And if you start casting that net and giving that weaponry to the IRS, they're going to start using it where it actually counts. And again, from a rhetoric point of view, saying that the rich don't pay their taxes, we need to weaponize the IRS, give them as many resources as humanly possible so they can go after them. It sounds good, and I understand where that's coming from. It's coming from a place of disdain for the ultra-wealthy in a society that seems to cater to the ultra-wealthy during a time if we have a K-shaped recovery to the point where even when I pass a damn gas station, it has a K on it right next to the dollar signs everywhere. That's really cool. I wasn't expecting that to show up right as I said that, but I had to include it in video. I understand where it's coming from. When you have a society where, we're consistently whether it's stuff like the artificially low interest rates that consistently benefit people who own assets and stocks at the expense of the blue-collar worker, the average person. I get why people are mad at the rich. I'm not saying that, I don't blame people for having that aggravation, but at the end of the day, they are the ones that are hiring accountants and CPAs and firms to do all of this stuff for them so that they are going to be in compliance with laws. They are not going to be evading taxes because they are breaking the law. They're going to be evading taxes by taking advantage of laws that are specifically written to cater to them so that what they are doing is not actually illegal. The tax evasion, in my opinion, is going to come from, again, your local small town grocery store or something in Custer, South Dakota, where somebody's getting paid off the books because that's the only way that place could even remotely afford to stay in business. And every time I read one of those headlines about how people are incredibly excited about how the IRS is going to be given more resources to go after tax cheats, it doesn't excite me because I can see into the future where this is going to go. It's not going to go into them figuring out that, the Walton family has been cheating on their taxes. It's going to be going into the low-hanging fruit. Again, even my business, again, I pay somebody good money to be in my business and make sure that I'm ever doing everything by the book. But there are a lot of small businesses that just try to do everything themselves, then go to H&R Block at the end of the year and hope it's all going to be okay, that might not be doing everything by the book. And they are going to be the low-hanging fruit. The small businesses that don't have a proper balance sheets or anything like that set up, the small businesses that are really just kind of winging it and figuring it out as they go, are the ones that are going to be the low-hanging fruit. Auditing a Best Buy is going to be a nightmare because they have people that did very well in college, that came from the best accounting firms, doing everything for them. And if you're an auditor, you're probably going to want to, shake the really thin tree for whatever the low-hanging fruit is. And I'm not even passing a tree here, but just to give you an idea. It's going to be easier to shake this bush than it is to shake a tree. And you're probably not going to get as much out of that as you would out of a tree, but it's easier to shake. It's midnight, so I'm kind of out of good analogies at this point. And also, that is separate from this particular piece of news, to be clear. The idea that the IRS was going to be given a lot of money and that money was going to be used to help the IRS go after tax cheats is a separate piece of news. I know that. That was announced many, many months ago from this piece of news that the gross inflow and gross outflow for specific accounts was now going to be reported to the IRS, but it still falls under that same general umbrella of trying to find tax cheats. And I don't know. I think this is going to wind up ending particularly poorly. I think it's going to wind up falling really hard on normal, average, everyday people and normal, average, everyday business owners. And again, I'm not even trying to sound like I'm holier than thou or anything there, but business owners that are even newer to the game than I am, that don't recognize that as early on as humanly possible, you should have someone dealing with your finances, preparing your reports, looking into your books, and telling you what you're doing and what you're doing wrong, so that when you actually do get audited 13 years later, everything is accounted for and you are not being kept up at night biting your nails off with stress from everything that is going on. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's it for today. And as always, I hope you learned something. And again, when you are reading headlines that say, IRS is going to be able to look into all of your transactions, or you read a Facebook post that says that if your bank account is over $600, they'll be able to see your transaction history and all that, ask for the primary. There's two things I'd ask of you. And feel free to, tell me it's not my business or I don't know what I'm talking about. A, ask for the primary source documentation for the claims. B, read the primary source documentation for the claims. C, if there is no primary source documentation for the claims, or the person making those claims has made claims that it is impossible to get wrong unless you were just making something up, consider removing that as a source from your list of trusted sources or people that you listen to. Because even people that I know and actually care about were telling me, look, they'll be able to see your transaction history, and it's like, really? Oh. So that sounds pretty crazy. Can you send me it? And I read the source documentation that they link me to, and it doesn't say that at all. Like, what are you talking about? And I'm, oh, okay, that person told you the source documentation said this. Always check it for yourself. Don't trust people, especially not me. Don't trust anybody, actually. If they have the ability to upload to them, here's a safer way to put it. If they can upload to the same medium that you can upload to, it's like Facebook or YouTube or any Tom, Dick, or Harry can just hit a button and it's up there, you may want to trust them even less. So, see you all in the next video. Bye now.